In the dimly lit corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, Lila walked alone, her footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. It was the graveyard shift, and she had always found solace in the quiet of the night. But tonight, something felt different. She had heard the rumors about the abandoned wing of the hospital, the one that had been sealed off for decades. Stories of ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena had circulated among the staff for years. Lila, a pragmatic nurse with a penchant for skepticism, had always dismissed such tales as products of overactive imaginations. As she approached the old, weathered door that led to the abandoned wing, she couldn't help but shiver. It was a wing that had been closed off due to budget cuts and lack of use, but the memories of what had transpired there lingered like a haunting melody. Lila's curiosity got the best of her that night, and she reached for the rusty doorknob. The door swung open with a creak, revealing a corridor shrouded in darkness. She flipped on her flashlight and stepped inside. The air was stale and cold, and the sound of her own breathing seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. Lila walked cautiously down the corridor, her flashlight revealing dusty medical equipment and abandoned patient rooms. Cobwebs clung to every corner, and the walls seemed to close in on her. As she explored further, she noticed something odd. A trail of fresh-looking footprints marred the layer of dust on the floor. It couldn't be possible. No one had entered this wing for years. Goosebumps prickled on her arms as she followed the footprints, her heart pounding. The trail led her to a room at the end of the corridor. She hesitated before pushing the door open. Inside, the room was freezing, and a dim light flickered in the corner. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she saw a figure hunched over in a hospital bed. "Hello?" Lila called out, her voice trembling. The figure didn't respond, but she could see the rise and fall of its chest as it breathed. She cautiously approached the bed and gasped when she saw the patient's face. It was an elderly woman, frail and withered, but her eyes were filled with an unnatural, otherworldly glow. Lila recognized her instantly from the hospital's old records, Mrs. Abigail Whitman, a patient who had been admitted to this wing over 50 years ago and had mysteriously vanished without a trace. Lila's training kicked in, and she rushed to Mrs. Whitman's side, checking her vitals. To her surprise, the woman's pulse was steady, and her breathing, though shallow, was consistent. It was as if she had been in a state of suspended animation for decades. With trembling hands, Lila reached for the old patient chart at the foot of the bed. The last entry was dated October 18, 1972, and it read, "Patient transferred to the abandoned wing for further observation." Lila's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the situation. How could Mrs. Whitman still be alive after all these years? And who had been taking care of her? As she pondered these questions, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing her flashlight. Darkness enveloped her, and the room was filled with an eerie silence broken only by the faint, labored breaths of Mrs. Whitman. Panic welled up inside Lila, and she fumbled in her pocket for her phone, using its weak light to illuminate the room. That's when she heard it, a faint whisper, like a distant echo. "Help me." Lila's heart pounded in her chest as she followed the voice. It led her to a hidden door in the corner of the room, obscured by layers of peeling wallpaper. She pushed it open, revealing a narrow, winding staircase that descended into darkness. Determined to uncover the truth, Lila descended the stairs, her phone's light flickering. The further she went, the colder it became, and the whisper grew louder. "Help me." At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself in a damp and underground chamber. The source of the whisper became apparent. Rows of old hospital beds lined the room, each occupied by a patient, their eyes glowing with the same unearthly light as Mrs. Whitman's. They were all frozen in time, trapped in a state of suspended animation, their voices echoing through the chamber, pleading for release. Lila couldn't comprehend the horror of what she was witnessing. In the center of the chamber, she discovered an ancient medical apparatus, a contraption of tubes and wires. That seemed to be keeping the patients in their current state. It was as if the hospital had been conducting some sinister experiment, defying the laws of life and death. Determined to put an end to this nightmare, Lila searched for a way to deactivate the machine. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the controls. But she knew she couldn't let this torment continue. With a deep breath, she pressed the button, and the machine powered down. The patient's eerie glow faded, and their voices fell silent. Lila felt a rush of relief, but it was short-lived. As she turned to leave the chamber, she heard a soft, disembodied voice behind her. "Thank you." Startled, Lila turned to see Mrs. Whitman, her eyes no longer glowing, standing before her. She smiled faintly, and then her form began to fade, dissipating like smoke until she vanished completely. Lila hurried back up the stairs and out of the abandoned wing, leaving behind the haunting mysteries that had plagued St. Mary's Hospital for decades. She knew she would never forget the night when she had confronted the darkness and found a way to bring peace to those who had been trapped in its grip for so long. From that night on, Lila couldn't dismiss the supernatural tales of the hospital, for she had become a part of them, forever haunted by the memories of the haunted hospital wing and the spirits she had set free.